right, there we go. So it's starting to record. All right, so in the next slide, wanted to go over some of the latest versions here. So if you were on previous meetings, you would have known that we have Power BI Service, the cloud. We'll go over different features there, but there was also a separate section dedicated to Power BI Report Server on-prem. Decided to remove that because the support there is waning for the report server. I think the latest version is September of 25, and there were very minor updates there, but nearly every resource is going toward the service version, right? So wanted to spend more time in real estate on some of those features. So as you may see here, Bing map deprecation is something that everybody should be aware of. If you're using any Bing map visuals in your Power BI reports, please be aware that it will be deprecated, right? So if you go to the latest feature summary, and there's a link there in this section where it walks you through what you should do if you're using Bing map visuals. I think it's Azure Maps they're moving toward. Is that right? But make sure that you're aware of that if you're using any Bing maps. Kind of on topic here, Copilot. So they just announced you can use Copilot to create DAX and DAX query view. It's generally available now. So feel free to use it in production, right? It's GA. It's not a preview feature any longer. So if you haven't been using it already, feel free to use it if you have access to Copilot there. The button slicer as well is now in GA. So I have little images here from the site that is linked there about what that looks like. So the button slicer, if you haven't used it yet, you can really create some fun, impactful slicers on your reports. I have an example. So for those that were on I think it was the August meeting, where Jen Heaton shared some of her stuff. She's done some really incredible things with button slicers, and I'm sure she'd be happy to share as well. So anyway, investigate that a little more, but the cross highlighting is pretty fun. So they have an example on the website, but basically their example was, if you are highlighting over North America, for instance, a region, anybody associated with that region would be highlighted over here in the button slicer there. So kind of a fun little feature makes it seem more like an app and a data product rather than a simple report, right? Auto expand table columns. This, maybe I'm strange, but I was very happy to see this. This is like a really great thing to have here, because oftentimes we'll have a table with maybe 5 columns and it's too wide. That visual is too wide, but we want it to expand across the entire thing. You can automatically do that now. So that was pretty cool to see. And then another one that I wanted to highlight was Performance Analyzer in the web. So if you haven't used Performance Analyzer before on desktop, this is a very impactful feature there for any troubleshooting you'd like to do in your report. So specific here, we tend to utilize direct query a lot because our row level security is baked into views within our data warehouse. So we use direct query to dynamically address the security there. But the limitation with that is performance, right? So the performance that we have on desktop sometimes is different than we have on the service for there. So the fact that we can use Performance Analyzer in the web now natively is it's pretty awesome. So we're going to be utilizing that internally as much as we possibly can. And as usual, there's many more features. So feel free to check out the feature summary for October 2025. And then announcements. So next month, we're going to go back to the office hours format for next month. I saw in the Slack channel there were a couple of questions in there around different things, a year-to-date calculation, some weird things happening with data flow Gen 2 refreshes and things like that. So if those are not answered in the chat, or we can't get an answer, feel free to ask those in the office hours event as well. It's becoming a great place. More and more people are joining that to ask their questions and troubleshoot live. So it's a really great way to network with other professionals and get your specific questions answered around the technical limitations that you're experiencing. And then January. So really special presentation coming in January from Lakshmi here. So Andrew, who is one of our esteemed guests for the panel discussion, works with Lakshmi at Missouri S&T, and guess what? She's fantastic. I would follow her if I were you on LinkedIn. She's been posting a lot of challenges lately, and she's really shown her skills, right? She's shown her skills in visualizing and doing some wonderful stuff with Power BI, and a lot of that stuff is native too that she's posting. So just a couple tweaks here and there, and it looks really special. So I would strongly recommend following her on LinkedIn, but also attending the January meetup where she's going to be showing some of the wonderful things that she's created and how to frame the storytelling within Power BI. And then, as always, if you're interested in joining the leadership team, please reach out to us. We're happy to have you. Just reach out and give us your info, and we'll meet and chat about it. And then the Slack channel, it exists. Please feel free to join it. I'm going to, during our discussion today, I'm going to be posting a couple, or at least one simple poll on the Slack channel. So please go there and engage with the poll. We want to get some more data around how folks are engaging with AI at their organizations or institutions. So I'll post in this chat when we post the poll on Slack, but please go in there and engage with us in there. So we'll make sure that the invite to the Slack channel is in the chat as well. Okay. So after this, look out for an email. We're going to have, the YouTube channel, the Slack workspace, and everything there in between. So like I said, this will be recorded. This session's being recorded. We'll post it on a YouTube channel once it's all done, and we can upload it, and it'll all be there. So it'll be there at least by tomorrow. So if you want to watch it again or want to share it with any of your colleagues, please feel free to go to our YouTube channel as well. And here we go, panel time. So like I said, without further ado, we wanted to introduce Andrew here. He's the Chief Data Officer at the Missouri University of Science and Technology, and we're going to be having a discussion with him and the user group leaders around AI and how we've implemented different features of AI and different components there as it relates to Power BI. But like I said earlier, please feel free to put your questions in the chat, right? It's a panel discussion, so we're going to be discussing amongst ourselves, but we want to engage with you all as well. So please make sure if you have a specific question and you didn't ask it on the forum earlier, feel free to ask it here, and we can discuss certain things about your questions, okay? So I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to lob the first question over to Andrew, and we can get this thing. Okay, so. All right, so this first theme, we're going to talk about governance and organizational readiness. So I guess, Andrew, when it comes to AI and your implementation of it, what's the biggest hurdle you've seen in higher ed for AI and in your experience?
So for me, it's the kind of that initial approval stage. I would say we're about a year into our journey of really trying to use AI, right? And as BI professionals, I feel like we have a responsibility, and some of us probably have pressure from our leadership to start using these tools. And we're a year in, we spent the first 11 and a half months going through that documentation security approval process, right? I think often because our jobs are to innovate and push our institutions ahead, it can feel like we might be at odds with our ISOs, right, our information security officers, because their job is to keep us secure, right? The more we push, the more we innovate, the harder we make their jobs. And AI is probably the strongest culprit that we've had recently for that. I can really understand their angst and their fear when it happens, particularly at the speed that Microsoft is introducing new features, right? Everything from Copilot assisted report building, predictive visuals, to the DAX and DAX Query Builder that came out in October. These are really powerful tools, but they also introduce a lot of new risks to our institutions. So I think it's really important, right, before any AI capability goes live, that we really go through that formal review process. We make sure that we're being compliant with FERPA, GDPR, HIPAA, if that falls under your organization. Making sure the data isn't leaving our tenant, access controls are in place, right? All those kind of really important things. What's really different about this than our traditional way in BI is we need to move from being reactive, which is kind of the normal way we approach security, to being very proactive, right? This is changing very quickly, and it's going to change the way that data is being used. And so for us, that's just definitely been the number one struggle that we faced. I'd say normally when we want to introduce a new tool or new software, right, that process can maybe be a few weeks. Where really for us, it took 11 months really to we finally just really got our approval for a real move forward with implementing these tools at a customer level at our institution.
So you mentioned change, right? And I think that's a
key component, because this is, AI with everything is all about change, right? It's changing, supposed to change how we work, the way we work. What about, how can you ensure that those changes that you're implementing are aligned with, the overall institutional strategy and any, change management strategies that come along with that?
So for us, I think about this process a lot as how when we move, for those of us who are old enough to remember when we moved from the cloud, higher ed is not the most innovative industry out there, right? We're usually considered one of the last adopters. I know we don't like to hear it, but it's true, right? And so a lot of us, right, are probably old enough to remember when our institutions moved to the cloud, and that was a big change for a lot of us, right? Particularly for our IT and our security teams, right? Having data on-prem in boxes in a closet on your campus felt a lot easier to secure than out in, Azure, AWS, whatever you're using. And so I think a lot of us hopefully developed strong change management protocols, disciplines during those periods. If you did, you're going through the same process again. What I think is a little bit different here is it's a lot more democratized. And it's we get to the agentic side. So like AI is now, it's like a new staff member that can do things that we don't understand and we don't employ, right? And I think that gives a lot of fear to it. So there's an extra layer to it that I guess I don't know the answer to that question. I think we're still kind of figuring it out. Our approach has been very selective in how we roll this out. So starting on the operational side, so we're trying to avoid student data as much as we can, right? The data that we really have to worry about protecting that's governed by FERPA or HIPAA or GDPR for international or European students. And focusing on our operational, so finance, HR, facilities, where there's still a huge ROI, right? Most of our institutions, the brick and mortar ones, spend a lot on the facility side. So AI can have a big impact there. But it's a lower stakes from a security standpoint.
Kevin.
So the ability to start, using those tools there, building a trust framework with IT, allowing them to build a security framework that they can then apply to our academic and research side when we get there, has been our approach. We'll see how it works out. Like I said, we're pretty early in, but that's our goal, to really try and minimize our risk posture as much as possible. And then, staying within the Microsoft stack, we feel a lot of security within that, knowing that through our BAA and then the various security tools like, Purview, if you guys use that on your campus, really allows us to kind of get a better handle on it.
I would imagine support from leadership, right? From executive leadership is probably pivotal and paramount to nearly all of this. So I'll share a little bit from my perspective. I was sharing earlier, we have a chief AI officer, right, at the University of Miami. And it's almost like as soon as he was hired, all of a sudden, hey, Copilot is now available for everybody. And so there's this leadership, this trust at the top level, and having that push is really helpful there. So with us at the University of Miami, we're very nascent when it comes to utilizing AI and embedding it, right? So you read all this stuff about agentic AI and development and everything in there in between. We haven't even approached that yet, but I do think you're spot on when it comes to not utilizing or not focusing on student data first, since it's governed so tightly there. And so I think one of the things that'll be interesting to see from my perspective is, 6 months from now, right? One, what changes will happen? We know there's going to be developments, all sorts of developments in multimodal AI and everything there. But two, from my perspective, I would love if, we got something off the ground running. And so one of the things that I want to talk about next is, data readiness and model hygiene. And so when it comes to some of the things I've worked on, we've tested out the, prep data for AI, right, within semantic models. So if anybody's doing any development, you've probably seen that within Power BI Desktop, this notification come up in the upper right saying, hey, prep your data for AI, and there in between. So we've tested that on a couple things, but we've also tested it with student data. And while the technology is ready, I think what I'm seeing is the end users need to be trained more into some of those things. So, and we also need to do a better job of getting that data in a semantic model and making it not just AI ready, but I think user ready as well. So the AI can read it. Sure, that's fine, but we need to ensure that, when it comes to governance and things therein, definitions, everybody using the same common terms, everything there, we need to ensure that that's in place. And then we could click that button, that wonderful check mark. It says prepped for AI, right, in the semantic model. Then it can be prepped for AI. And then those that may not be aware, let's say you have your sample prompts in your semantic model for preparing it for AI. You have everything there. Everything's perfect, and then you prep it. You can actually access that semantic model through the standalone Copilot experience in your institution and ask questions of, hey, for instance, what's the, for the fall 2025 term, what's the current enrollment for undergraduate students, right? Something like that. And if it's prepped for AI, according to Microsoft, there's no more friction there. It will access that semantic model and give you an answer, whether you like it or not. So little forewarning here. Maybe don't be so urgent in prepping it for AI without understanding the impacts there. That's something that I'm speaking from experience. I didn't realize it would do that until I read more and more about it. So I think training, like I said, at the very least, training everybody and maybe establishing certain power users there internally, having them go through a sort of training protocol and having them be certified, if you will, to ask questions of the AI there as well.
So I really like that answer. At our institution, they put N365 behind a training wall. You can't get a license if you don't go through like a 3-course class, which most of us do for student data, right? You have to take FERPA training and take a test before you can access student data. So I think it's something we're all used to. But I 100% agree. Like training is going to be half the battle for a lot of our users.
Nice. One of the questions is, how do you balance speed with data quality when enabling AI? And so I could answer that, but does anybody else want to answer that question from their perspective?
I'd say for us, this is one of the places we feel most comfortable. If you've been on the Power BI journey for, we've been on it since 2018, 2019. Hopefully your data's in a pretty good shape. If you've really been cleaning it, getting it ready, and modeling the semantic model layer for just your normal descriptive and diagnostic reporting out in your Power BI tenant, you should have a pretty good handle, I would say, around now. Things should be defined. They should be well documented. So to me, those kind of went, it almost like reserved to us the time that Microsoft dropped these capabilities for us. It felt like great timing. So it's one of our least worries.
One of the struggles we have is, when it comes to that, is a lot of our data, yes, we have semantic models for it, but a lot of the semantic models are per report, and we have a lot of stuff in the cubes as well. And so what we'd like to do is leverage the Power BI layer more so than the data warehouse layer. So that way we can leverage the AI, right, capabilities that come with it as well. But right now, a lot of it, we're relying upon the data warehouse layer, which is good. That's not a bad thing. Let me just put that out there. It's not a bad thing. But we want to utilize Power BI more, especially now that we have Power BI, Fabric. We have Fabric capacity with some of these things. We want to utilize Fabric. I haven't even touched on Fabric, by the way. If anybody, that's a whole other ball of wax right there. But okay. And I think one thing that, we talk about AI and we typically think of AI, right? The modern AI, like chatbots, ChatGPT, all that stuff there. But one thing we wanted to point out as well is that AI capabilities have been around for a long time, right? And so, Brian, I want you to touch upon this if you may. Some of the visuals or features that have already existed in Power BI, like key influencers, right? So I know you've utilized key influencers at your institution or in your career, but I guess what are some of the most surprising things you've seen from key influencers, and how have you utilized those already? So it's sort of like the pre-AI before the AI hype.
Yeah, and you're right that these things are not like new AI tools, like they existed in Power BI for a long time. And I feel like I'm using key influencers more and more recently. And I usually use it when not only the aim is to show the visualization, but also to analyze the data. And I think that's where the key influencers come in place. I use Q&A, but I'm very, very cautious giving access to people, to end users, how to use it. And I use like narrative, but it's not perfect yet. But with the key influencers, I feel like to your question, how how surprising insights I've noticed is I'm using it in two of the dashboards I created. The one is the retention rate, and I feel like I use the key influencers where I'm trying to look at different variables and how different variables impact the retention rate. So I use variety of variables, like I want to look at it by department, by college, by student type, by residency, how each of these variables impact the retention rate. And I feel like when I was doing it by major, and I'm going into integrity into some of these analytic part, I saw that there are certain majors where you see like really have high. So when you look at the key influencers, you see what majors make your retention go up, and then there's some majors that pop up because they have 100% retention rate, and then there's some pop up that they're at the bottom. They are the ones. These are the majors that actually are impacting your retention rate going down. Um, but I feel like this is where it comes down to data informed rather than just data driven, and where you should not be just using AI in isolation. So looking into when I started to drill down, I realized the ones that are showing up that make your retention go up are the majors where we have only few students enrolled, like 2 or 3 students enrolled. So of course, all 3 students return next year, retention rate at 100%. These majors are rocking. But these are not the majors where like they have most of the student population. But on the contrast, the majors that really have more than 100 students enrolled, there will be less retention in those majors because we have more students enroll in those majors. We're gonna lose more students from that bucket. So the other one that I really find it insightful was the FT dashboard. So, and the reason we created it was the aim was to budget forecast. So and if your institution, the tuition is based on the credit hour and you don't have a flat fee, the you don't really look at the head count. You're going to look at the FTE, which is full-time equivalency. And that's because the revenue is going to come from the full-time equivalency, how high the FTE is, and that's how the budget is going to be predicted. So when I started looking at it, and if you worked in higher ed, you kind of have a sense where this higher FTE comes in, but the whole analysis was how we can predict a better budget. So I started looking at the student type, and if you know the first time undergrad, that's where the FTE goes up. So we have to market more to bring in more first time undergrad, because those are the ones who are enrolled at 12 credit hours or even higher, 15 credit hours. But on the contrast, when you look at the students who are the student type is high school, that's where the lowest FTE comes in, because these are the students who are enrolled at the high school and they're actually taking classes. So they take 1 or 2 classes at our institution, so that those are the population that brings the whole FTE down. So this one was insightful. It helped us to create strategies how we're going to plan, and we have to make more effort to bring in more first time undergrad, because that's just going to impact our FTE directly. It's going to impact our budget directly. So these are some of the ones that I find like really good, where when I was using key influencers, and it was helpful for the end users to see, being more transparent rather than me creating a report and say this is where the effort should go. They can use it on their end and see how each variables are affecting the FTE or the retention rate.
Yeah. So I don't know. Real quick, I don't want to forget this. Dan posted something in the chat, and then I'm gonna get back to the key influencers. I think this is really important to bring out if those aren't in the chat. Just make sure your semantic models are secure as well before you enable Copilot, because users will be able to access much more than just the data included in the report pages. That's a very good point. Think of they're accessing the semantic model itself, not the report. Or you can't access the report, but it's more so it's just that. So yeah, please make sure you're aware of that as well. So anyway, back to the key influencers. So I think one thing that I've used key influencers for, it's sort of, I guess, spammed it a little bit, is like surveys. So internal questionnaire surveys that we, through Qualtrics or even Nessie, right? If those are anybody familiar with Nessie, finding which questions or answers to which questions influence, others, right? That can be pretty intensive work to do, but if we know that leadership only cares about XYZ, these 3 different questions or answers to those questions, we can feed a lot more data into that and have the key influencers be there as a sort of an exploratory cheat code, if you will, for everything there. And the thing I love about key influencers though is it gives you statistics, but it doesn't make it feel like it's technical statistics. It says, hey, this an increase of 1 unit or whatever it may be in this answer will result in 2.x times this other, right? Like where it influences there. So I think that's a big takeaway for me is oftentimes, right, you read research papers and a lot of folks don't have time to read a lot of research papers when it comes to the technical findings there. So this does a great job at distilling that content down into I guess, a narrative form that's easy to understand for everybody as well. So yeah, does anybody else have any experience, not just with key influencers, right? That's what we've highlighted, but what about the Q&A functions or the narratives there? Well, I haven't used narrative really in any reports there, but I'm interested to see if anybody's used any of the narrative stuff in production before.
I have tried narrative, but I was not impressed. And even if it's good to start there, but then I end up changing most of the text because uh, what I'm trying to show in the narrative is actually not what narrative was actually, and it's going very nitty-gritty into the data level. Um, I've tried Q&A, but as I said, like I'm very cautious when using. I have only given to one person access to that dashboard where I have the Q&A open because it was more like a pressure that we have to use AI and move into that area. And I was very reluctant in the beginning to open that QA, but I cleaned up the data very well. And but other than that one person, nobody has access. So I don't want to open that QA to the entire institution where everybody's interpreting their way and asking. But I think it needs a little bit more time before I'll be comfortable personally to open it to the institution so that they can just pull the data.
Gotcha.
We try to use Q&A a lot. We've had some success with it with our executive, our C-suite. The farther we go down the pyramid or the hierarchy, the harder it gets. We run an internal training conference on our campus every summer, and as kind of like a test for this, we did a big survey. A lot of our staff, is for all staff. We asked them, what is an FTC? And over half of our respondents said a full-time college instead of a first-time college, right?
Oh.
And so if you're using if you're using the Q&A narrative and an FTC is a first-time college, right, you're going to get a result you didn't expect. And so just kind of taught us, kind of Jeff was saying earlier about like how important training is, and just getting the standard nomenclature out there, getting everyone kind of speaking the same language, playing the same game on the same field before we really start opening these tools up too broadly.
Full-time college, huh? Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was very, it's a little disappointing though to hear it. You know, I was a little shocked.
Hey, easy to see.
Yeah.
I want to give, if anybody's reading this, I'm trying to keep up, but I can't. But please refer to this chat. I mean, there's some really good stuff going on in the chat about security, right? So going back to what Andrew was bringing up at the very beginning around security and AI, I think if you read through the chat, it is all about that, right? I'll share a little anecdotal evidence here, but University of Miami, we have a very robust security platform. Like I said, the row level security is baked into our secure join table views in our data warehouse. What we need to do is ensure that if we have any of our semantic models in, say, import mode, a lot of ours are in direct query, but if we use anything with import mode, we need to ensure that folks are not getting access to data that they necessarily should not have inadvertently through AI. And so it's something to keep in mind there. I know the majority here from conversations we've had use import mode, probably a combination of row level security, depending on the audiences there. But if you're using direct query and you have a very robust, I'll call it robust, restrictive security within your organization, please make sure that you're not inadvertently violating that as a trade-off for some convenience there to use AI. One thing I'm gonna put in the chat as well is we got a couple questions related to this, but I'm gonna put 2 links here, and then we're gonna go to the next topic. These links are fantastic. Please read them. The first one is, both of them are from Kurt Bueller. So if you haven't read any of his stuff before, he's very good at what he does. He's very thorough. He's really, he's brilliant. He's really good at what he does. So The first one is about agentic development. It's a couple months old, a few months old, and with a flavor of, BI, Power BI in particular. The second link is something that I noticed he published. It's going to be a series about an hour and a half ago, around an hour ago on LinkedIn. So it's actually really new, and it's around agentic development and semantic models in simple terms, right? So it's really it's a fun read, at least it was for me. So I encourage you all to read through some of that. We're going to be touching on that. I think James has some experience with some of the things that have been mentioned in those articles. But um, I guess the next question I want to ask though is really, this is for anybody. Where do you see AI taking BI in the next 12 months? Not just Power BI, but business intelligence. Any clues?
So from my end, I like to think of this usually through the analytics hierarchy. So you think about, you start with descriptive, right? Like what happened, how many of this happened, descriptive, why did this happen, predictive, what will happen, and then prescriptive, how do we make this thing happen? Most of us spend most of our time on the descriptive layer, right? How many students do we have? How much money do we have? How many students did we retain, right? And by the time you can even think about getting the diagnostic layer, because it takes a lot longer, right? We retain this many students, but why did we lose how many we lost? You have some survey coming up or something else, right? You have to go on to the next project, right? It takes a lot longer to do that. That's where I see AI really kind of shooting us through, right? It's going to do a lot better job if you have that strong semantic layer that supports your descriptive analytics, right? How many of everything did you have? It's going to do a really good job of explaining why did we lose so many students, right? I don't see it being as impactful on the predictive, so maybe skipping that layer of like, who will we lose next? But on the prescriptive, giving you suggestions, like, so let's say an advisor using a tool over a semantic model. So it's going to tell them, hey, we tell them who you lost. It's going to tell them why you lost them, right? That's kind of like a key influencer's visual. And then it's going to, I think, be good at prescriptive. Tell them, hey, here are things that you might be able to do to not lose as many students next semester, right? How can you increase your retention from fall to fall or spring to spring? So I see that from like a BI professional, something that's going to change kind of our workflow. The other thing I see is what we've all talked about is a big portion of our jobs is going to become training, teaching. And it's not just training how to use these tools, but data literacy. Everything from, we've talked about earlier, like nomenclature on campus. What's an FTC? What is retention? What is persistence? And why are retention and persistence different? So that they can ask proper questions. But also teaching them more about data security, something I think we all skip through. Hey, you took that FERP exam, great, here's your access to data, and we all move on. I think we're going to be a lot more careful about that moving forward. Records retention, that kind of thing. So I think it's going to change our day-to-day activity a lot. And outside the Power BI, or kind of tangential Power BI space, when we start getting to like Copilot agents, being able to use like our curated semantic model data, the interaction between the Power Platform and Power BI and all the suite of tools we have, like Teams, Excel, Outlook, SharePoint, which is both a blessing and a curse. From a security perspective, that's the thing that's been hardest for us. Is a lot of us probably have strong SharePoint environments that we started on-prem 20 years ago and we moved to the cloud, and it's a wild mess out there of data and reports, and most of it's probably not classified. But Copilot can read it all, which makes it really accessible. It makes it really easy to set up a knowledge source for our administrative staff to use and understand the policies, procedures of our jobs. But it also opens up a lot of data potential misuse or being seen by people who shouldn't be seen by. So again, I think training on that end and cleaning up is going to change our day-to-day lives as BI professionals immensely.
I think so I agree with everything. And as an addendum, I really think, communication, right? We need, everybody, at least when I was, in school, it's like, hey, we need to learn to code, we need to learn statistics, we need to learn all that, which is all great. We still need to understand that 100%. But there's another added tool set, and we need to, you mentioned data literacy training, but the communication, being able to communicate these things. And when it comes to training, as everybody probably here knows, if you're not a good communicator, you might not be a good trainer either. So learning how to communicate and distill things down to their simplest components for everybody. Should everybody that's using an LLM know exactly how LLMs work? Maybe not down to the minute details, but they should understand at a very high level, right? Especially the hallucinations. Honestly, the hallucinations scare the bejesus out of me. It's a very technical term. And that's one of the main reasons I am very hesitant to utilize AI in a lot of things in production. So, for instance, I'll give an example. We have like surveys, course evaluations, something similar to that at University of Miami, and we've had requests. Okay, can we do text analytics and things like that for that? Sure, we can utilize it, but there's a lot of hallucination that comes into play. Just as an example, we utilize Copilot to analyze, it was a certain survey, but it misattributed a response for a certain school to another one, right? So it said, hey, a lot of responses are related to a certain component, but it was actually the component for another school or college rather than the one. So it crossed wires a little bit, and it was all within the same conversation too. So I think there was some, hallucination, if you want to call it that. But I caught it and we didn't eventually use it. But that scares me, right? Like, I don't think it's going to be a turnkey solution 12 months from now, right? The original question. 12 months from now, we're still going to be proofreading stuff, right? We're still going to be training ourselves and others to not trust it wholesale and what it gives you. But I do think 12 months from now, when it comes to documentation, and hopefully, James, touch upon this if you may, but like utilizing AI to automate documentation, MCP servers, and things of that note, I think there's true promise with that. And so I don't like documenting. It's needed. Let me just make that clear. I don't like it. I don't like to do it all the time, but I understand it's very important to do it. And so we still do that. But I would love if we could automate that a little more. And so particularly if we have brand new SQL scripts or views or SQL Server objects, let's utilize AI to automatically document that stuff and create the requirements doc and do all the things there. From my perspective, that's where I'm hoping and looking for 12 months from now to be a little better off with the automation perspective. But I mentioned MCP servers, right? So we got a question, and I think James is an expert in all this stuff that he touches here. But I think I want him to touch upon this a little bit. The question we got, or the topic, was related to that first link I put in the chat there from Kurt Bueller, SQL BI article. How have you been using AI chatbots and agents, and have you been using MCP servers for BI development? So I know, James, you've used it a little bit, but could you share some of your experience with how that's worked out for you?
Yeah, so I think probably the biggest takeaway for using AI as a BI developer is you don't have to worry about it hallucinating results if you're having it generate code for you, which then generates the results. If you can validate that the code gets the correct answers, code is deterministic. LLMs are not. So that's the distinction there. If you take an LLM and tell it, go look at my semantic model and tell me how, what the values are. Well, you can't trust that. Of course you can't trust that. But what you can do is ask the LLM, hey, help me write some DAX queries that I can get the data out here. And then you can actually validate that. You can go and run the DAX queries and see, do I get the right result? When you do get the right result, you can say, great, I can use this DAX query in production and I can be confident that it'll be fine. So with that in mind, I've been using LLMs a lot to help me with coding. Just from a speed perspective, it's much faster to sort of describe, here's the general thing that I need, have it go, blah, here you go. All right, I need to change this, I need to change that. This needs to be a little bit different over here, and with that part we don't need. And it's much easier to make small edits to something that already exists than to completely write it from scratch. It's also really helpful for diagnosing error messages, because a lot of times the error messages that come out of these systems are so esoteric. It's like, I don't know what that means. You can copy paste the error message into your LLM of choice, and it is likely to have some helpful information for you, and possibly even suggestions on how to fix the problem. So that's another thing I've been noticing a lot. So yeah, I would definitely recommend using LLMs to try to augment your capabilities as a developer, but not to use them in production themselves. I think that they are a development assistant tool and not an application in and of themselves, at least not for anything mission critical. Like,
Yep.
you know, I don't think anyone here is in the kind of business where it's like, sure, you could set up a thing that's like, here, generate me a photo of or a picture of whatever it is, and then, you know, like, all right, cool, here, and we're going to charge you a certain amount of money for every time you generate a picture or something. We're not in that business. We're in the business of educating people, and that's too important to allow something to potentially give a wrong answer somewhere.
Yep.
So until they solve the determinism problem, which is nowhere, like, that's not going to happen as long as they're using the current architecture of LLMs. They are probabilistic. They basically are just predicting the next the next word or the next phrase, the most likely of those. And because of the fact that they're being computed in parallel across all of these GPUs, and all of those GPUs are being operated at different frequencies and things like that, you'll get slightly different answers every time because of that, because it's being, you know, it's getting it's doing that calculation in distributed fashion. So, you know, I think that they're working on ways to try to basically always get the same answer out. You know, when you ask the same question, you get the same answer no matter what. But that still doesn't guarantee that it won't hallucinate. It just means that it will give you the same wrong answer every time. So, yeah, that's the caution I have for you is to, you know, use it as a way to augment your skills and to increase your productivity. Help you do things like, all right, well, I've got measures now. I need to create new versions of those measures for different purpose. Or, for instance, I've got you know, enrollment measure, but I needed to get an enrollment measure that gives me like a over time kind of thing. That's a pattern that's so common out there that it's really easy to ask an LLM for assistance with extending an existing thing and making it and adapting it to a pattern that's already sort of that's well known and exists out there in the world. So you don't have to know exactly the syntax how to do it yourself. But then again, you verify it, make sure that it actually gives you the answers you're looking for before you roll it out.
Hey, James, I had a quick question. And once again, thank you guys for setting this up for us. This is awesome. But do you prefer one GPT over another when, for example, I love my workflow on asking it for, you know, enhancing DAX. But have you seen a difference in feeding it to either ChatGPT 5 or 4 or even just a Power BI Wizard GPT in general over like Claude? Like, has anyone seen a difference that they prefer one over the other, you know, using Gemini or Copilot and stuff like that?
I use Claude exclusively for code. I don't bother with any of the other ones.
Okay. Nice.
Far and away the best. So
how about for Jeffrey and Andrew?
So when I'm using GitHub Copilot, I use Claude as well. I don't touch anything else.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep.
We're saying get a Copilot Claude. Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Okay.
Now, I will say I have the Copilot standalone app, and I have that. I use sometimes I'll use that, and I'll click the try GPT-5, and like maybe it's like DAX or something, right? But my experience, right, it's hit or miss, largely hit or miss when it comes to that. So that's why if I'm in a hurry, I'll just use that. But if I'm already in VS Code, GitHub Copilot, then it's Claude.
I will say that if I'm looking for help with something that I don't really, where it's something that actually requires a little bit of contemplation, or it's more complex than just replace this with this anywhere you find it, and it's not just a simple find replace. It kind of has, if it has to have a little bit of intelligence about like putting words together in different places, and you know, yeah, sometimes it might have a, you know, a dot before it or something like that. In those kind of situations where I'm just doing a mass find replace or a mass change something slightly in a way that I can't just do a find and replace, I'll use one of the models that's free, like GPT 4.1 or those ones in GitHub Copilot. But whenever it's something that is more nuanced, like it needs to be able to write code that where the code doesn't exist yet, based on a description that I give it, Claude. That's it.
I know someone else raised their hand in the group, but recently in LinkedIn, I think it's been kind of out there on how people have been connecting Claude to Power BI and for it to read the whole data model and all that stuff. What do you guys think about that? And I'm pretty sure you would not suggest if I start connecting to my company's Power BI for Claude to start digging into the whole model.
Yeah, if you don't have a Claude business license, it's probably against your organization's like rules to feed any of your data into a like a personal plan, regardless of which provider. The only ones that have a guarantee of your data not leaving that environment and not being used to train more data or more LLMs in the future are the professional grade plans, and those are like 10 times as much as a personal one in a lot of cases. So if you're using something for, if you're using your own GitHub Copilot license as an example, you want to make sure you don't ever give it any actual data points from your like you can give it metadata, you can have it look at your model as long as your model doesn't contain any PII. But yeah, it's just something you want to be really cautious about. That's one thing. It's like if you hook it up to your model in Power BI Desktop, Power BI Desktop has the ability to query the actual data and return that information to the model. And so just be real cautious about hooking up it doesn't matter if it's Claude or whatever, to a live Power BI semantic model, because it could run a query and try to, even if it's just doing a query that's like, hey, give me the just like this, the what do you call it, the schema, that's running a query. And if you don't know that it's going to do that ahead of time or not, I'd just be really cautious about that.
As James mentioned, enterprise licenses are really expensive, but most of them give educational discounts, particularly if you package. So like we're an S&T school, we're engineering and mathematics. And so we buy out, for our students on the educational side, and then you can piggyback on that for your BI side, and it becomes a lot more affordable pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Nice, thank you.
So 2 questions. So I see there's a hand raised, but Alex asked a question in the chat prior to this, so then we'll get to the next question. But Alex asked, I think it's a pretty good question. Are you thinking of levels of criticality of an inaccurate response with your data or reports, and financial implications, operational implications, etc.? So I will say what I've immediately thought of is if we're utilizing AI, not that we would, but if we're utilizing AI to report data to the federal government, right? Compliance reports, that type of thing, and it has something wrong and we cannot audit why it got it wrong, right? To me, that's a big time deal. We can't do that. We can't inaccurately report data and just be quote unquote careless about things like that when it comes to compliance. When it comes to internal reporting, we'll call it, like sort of the operational side of the house, I've thought about having a rubric and sort of feeding a rubric to the AI, the agent, and saying, hey, do this, that, and the third. But I haven't thought about how it can automatically know if it's wrong, detect a wrong answer, right? Like we still have to do some analysis on that to determine if it's wrong or right. So I don't, if anybody has any ideas, I'd love to hear them. But I haven't thought of anything good that we can automate it and really give an answer to what the cost, right, of an inaccurate response there.
And the ugly truth is that no matter what, somebody's going to have to check the output and make sure that it's correct. You can't just turn an AI loose on your data and ask it questions and just take those questions for granted, regardless of whatever the level of criticality is. I wouldn't trust it to give me the estimate of how much it's going to cost to put a new roof on the school or whatever. Like no matter whether it's PII or not, whether it's the cost of a single textbook, I don't care. I'm never going to ask it to give me that stuff without it giving me the code that it wants me to run. Then I can decide if I want to run that code the way that it is. And then I can take those results and I can either check them myself using, if I know how to query the data myself, I can go and check the source system and run that and say, okay, cool. Now I know that this code can be used in production. Or if I don't know how to vet it myself, I can take to someone in the organization who does. So if it's accounting or finance data, I take it to the accounting and finance department and say, all right, here's the results I get out of this, can you verify that this is correct for this question?
For us, I don't. Oh, go ahead, please.
No, go ahead, Andrew.
I don't see us ever, using it anytime soon for, like just said, external reporting. iPads, Herd, really, and the rankings. I mean, you can really get dinged, right, if you misrepresent yourself to U.S. News or Wall Street Journal or Niche or one of them. For us, it's internal, and I can see it being, for an example, I can see, like, let's say we're looking at our financial aid and how we want to model it moving forward, right, to increase enrollment. I would never, like, to James' point, like, ask it straight up, give me a new model on how we're going to distribute financial aid and then implement it. But using it to get suggestions, if we did this, what would that look like? And using that to help frame a conversation that then our financial CFO, financial aid office, budget office have to then move forward. But then, yes, someone's going to have to go down and then do the real work to come up with that real financial aid model that's going to be implemented. So I think it can be like a great way to speed run through the initial whiteboarding part of a major change, but it's not going to be your major change anytime soon.
I was just going to add, like what everybody else said. I'm not gonna take a risk at all with any kind of reporting. I feel like I'm also not going to ask a question if my boss is asking a question and saying, "Can you just send me this number?" I'm not going to use AI for that one, unless it's sometimes like a good to know information, like how many red flowers we have in on the campus. Maybe that kind of information I'll try to use it, but we don't get to ask that much. But like when we do the iPads, I feel like one person prepares it and the other person checks it. So it's kind of 2% doing it, and then we feel confident that it's good to go and good to get logged. But if we have worked in IR and IT and this hired as like how much is at stake, we check the numbers like multiple times, and I personally check it like so many times till I feel like, okay, now I'm confident that it's good to go. So I just agree with what everybody else mentioned.
Awesome. And so I think putting something stupid but funny in the chat, and then I'm gonna ask. So is it Raziola? Is that how you pronounce your name? You would like to ask your question?
So, yeah. So my question is like, is it fine to use the cursor, because the cursor is right now is like growing like anything. So for the coding perspective, is it cursor is like worth it to use it, or I mean, just wanted to know the opinion from the experts.
My understanding is a cursor is just an IDE that has an AI component built into it, just like if you were using VS Code with GitHub Copilot. So it's a matter of finding out what the privacy policies are for the model that they're using in there, and whatever license you have with them, and making sure that whatever you're doing with it, if the license you have is set up so that the data that is sent to them does not ever get used for training. That's the thing you have to keep in mind. It probably doesn't really matter that much which tool you use. What matters is whether your prompts are private.
Yeah, I mean, I found it's nice, but I wanted to know the opinion from like you guys. Like if you use your cursor, or like I mean, you're not aware about.
I haven't used Cursor, but like I said, it's just an IDE. It's just like VS Code with GitHub Copilot. You're getting the same kind of thing. It's helping you write code in an IDE, and but if you like the user interface, you like the experience of using Cursor, that's fine. Just know what your license is getting you, and like know how if your prompts are being used to train the LLM that they have, you have to be super cautious about how you use that in your organization, and it might even be against your organization's policies, regardless of. So just read the fine print.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much, James, for your input. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from folks? We have a minute left on the scheduled time. Happy to answer something real quickly if anybody has anything.
I have one thing I wanted to add, and that is that we've been spending this whole time talking about LLMs, and we haven't talked anything at all about the other types of AI that's out there. You can use machine learning to do things like if you have security cameras, you can use that to figure out where are the traffic jams, in your buildings, and see. Yeah, it looks like we're having people trying to squeeze through this tiny little place over here at certain times of day. Maybe we can try to schedule things differently next semester so that we're using classrooms that are further apart and when so that those large crowds don't end up running into each other. That's the kind of thing you could use AI for without any sort of concern that it's going to be a problem for something, because it's really all you're doing is just trying to have it look at a lot of data and not have to have somebody sit there and scrub through thousands of hours of video looking for traffic jams of of people. But an AI model could spot that instantly.
It's a fantastic point, right? Like all the hype and talk recently is on LLMs because of ChatGPT and everything, but like good old machine learning, right? We had it's 3:00, but we had a predictive model, long story short, developed for student success that's been wildly successful at UM. But also I read a story about automating the transfer credit evaluation process at another institution where they've automated how many, reading transcripts that students submit, and they have a tool that looks through all of this through, I guess, OCR, image recognition, and then it automatically determines how many transfer credits, and they've been able to say, like it's 99% accurate or something like that. I remember reading about that. So that's another example, right, of utilizing AI at student facing, right, for everything there. Okay. Yeah, and then awesome. So look, it's 3:01. Thank you all for joining. Thanks, Andrew, for taking the time today to share your experiences with everybody in the group. I think it's been really great to hear your side of the story, especially from a chief data officer's perspective. So thank you. I want to encourage everybody, please join the Slack channel. Right, there's a couple questions in there that haven't been answered. Feel free, engage. If you have questions, ask them in there. And engage as a community. We're all here to help each other. And if you want to wait for December, please join the December office hours event, and we will talk to you there. Hope everybody has a great holiday season if we don't get to talk, and see you later. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.